Welcome. Good evening to you. Happy Monday night. Let me know out there if the sound is okay. Welcome, welcome. Looks like we've got about 65 people in the stream right now. Hopefully we'll pick up a few more people in a couple of minutes. Nice to see you all. Just looking at the chat here. Hello to everybody out there. Marshall, good to see you, brother. Helping out there with moderation. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Sounds good. All right. Getting indications that the sound is good. If it's off, just let me know in the chat there. I'll try and catch it. I might have to be sipping a little bit throughout the show, clearing my throat. I'm getting over a respiratory infection I've had this week, so I haven't been doing a whole lot of talking this week, trying to save my voice. But I have done a couple of interviews. I've got one tomorrow with Health Ranger Mike Adams. I'll be on his show tomorrow. I think that one is at 5 p.m. Eastern. I'll tweet about it once I've got more details, but that should be tomorrow. I've got some more lined up. Tonight I want to talk with you about I don't know. There's so much of the stuff going on out there is following a notable pattern. Israel does this because I reported on some of the previous conflicts in 2008 and 14. I have picked up on their cycle, what they do. And so it was not hard to predict how they were going to do it this time as well. And you already have seen a big reduction in the high volume, the mass casualties that they were inflicting on the civilian population. It's still happening. They're still killing plenty of people. But once they're got to a certain level of international furor, they settle down and they go into this I guess you could call it a ground operation. They're scared as hell to get in there and fight in urban warfare against the Palestinians. They don't want to do it. As much as they can fire missiles from the sky, from the safety of the air, that's what they want to do. They do not want this ground fight. But Netanyahu's in a bind. He's got to go forward and do some of it. So that's why you see limited action with tanks, not a whole lot of heavy ground forces going in fighting yet, and may not. What you could see is Israel, at least from the indications of the Pentagon, other members of the Biden administration, they seem to be under the impression that what Israel is trying to do is force a large response from Hezbollah so that Israel can go in and repeat its 1982 invasion of Lebanon, in which they killed 20,000 people. So the problem, of course, is once you invade Lebanon, it's all out war with Hezbollah at that point. And Israel is not going to be fighting on the ground. They're going to do what they have done to Gaza so far, which is constant aerial bombardment. And so it's going to result in massive death toll in Lebanon if it happens. And so Hezbollah is going to pull out all the stops. They're going to hit Tel Aviv as hard as they can. They're really going to go to it. Iran cannot afford to lose Hezbollah. And so Iran would do everything it could to keep resupplying Hezbollah. Hezbollah is Iran's crown jewel. There are about 15 proxies that Iran arms in the resistance against the U.S. imperialism in the region and the encroachment of Israel, into Syria, and so forth. But Hezbollah is the biggest by far of the militias that Iran backs. It would be a huge problem for Iran if Hezbollah uh, really starts taking it on the chin from Israel. So you would see Iran step up its efforts, which of course is exactly what Israel wants. They want to see the United States jump into the fray. And Netanyahu he was the cheerleader for getting the United States into the Iraq war to begin with. Uh, he gave congressional testimony telling the U.S. Congress back after 9/11 that, you see, this is how these crazy Muslims are, and if you don't get over there and depose Saddam Hussein and change the Iraqi regime, you're going to end up with a nuclear holocaust in the United States. So he pushed and he pushed, and he got the United States to go after Iraq. And ever since, he's been pushing the United States to go after Iran. He certainly had his hooks in Donald Trump and pushed Trump hard. And Trump took some very provocative actions, things that no former U.S. president had done, with regard to giving green light to settlement building, to acknowledging Israel's claim over Jerusalem, and so forth. And it was Netanyahu that pushed Trump to strike Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian general who eradicated ISIS. And then, of course, Netanyahu backed out the last minute, which is why Trump has foul words for Netanyahu these days, because it made Trump look like an idiot. But anyway, of the stuff that I see in social media, among the arguments that are made, that I'm sure the rest of you see more than anything else, or as much as anything else, are Zionist claims to the land of Palestine based on a couple of different things. One is the claim to have the right to the lands of Palestine because God gave it to them. The Bible says God gave the land to the Jews, the chosen people. That's it. Christian Zionists will parrot that like crazy. You'll also hear arguments that the Zionists make that, well, Jews have lived in the land for thousands of years, for 3,000 years, and so we have a right to the land. So I know I have talked with you guys about this some in the past, but I want to reiterate some of this because I will cut this after this live stream's over. I'll cut some of this down and put it into more digestible size videos that can be shared with others. I think that we really need to do a good job, or a better job, at refuting these false claims to the land that Israel makes through its proxies, primarily the Christian Zionists. So we're going to talk about that because this false claim that Jerusalem has been the capital of Israel for thousands of years is not just untrue, it's so easy to refute because the Bible does not say that. But it's a very influential lie. They repeat this lie because not enough people understand the issue enough to be able to refute it. So that's what we're going to talk about. And if you like the information, I'm putting a link in the chat. I can't get super chats. I was demonetized for talking about this Israeli, Zionist stuff years ago. You can go to buymeacoffee.com/blackstoneintel to chip in instead of a super chat. Jerusalem has not been the capital of Israel for 3,000 years the way that they say. Now, I'm going to say something very provocative, and then I'm going to back it up. Did you know that if you add up all the years that Jerusalem was the capital of the kingdom of Israel, including all of the time frames that are included in the Bible, it comes out to less than 200 years. Jerusalem was the capital of the kingdom of Israel for less than 200 years. Washington, D.C. has been the capital of a living nation longer than Jerusalem was the capital of ancient Israel. And that status of Jerusalem as a capital city of a political state, it was over well before Jesus was even born. And I say this for the benefit of my Christian friends. There are various versions of this argument, so we're going to walk through all of them. We're going to go through the history. We'll examine the various claims. According to most Jewish and non-Jewish Bible scholars, Abraham lived around 1800 BC. Now, I'm going to preface what I'm about to say with this. I think that the argument of who gets the land based on who God gave it to is one of the most ridiculous arguments you could possibly make. You cannot resolve this conflict or resolve these things by an appeal to one religion's scriptures. And we'll talk about why in a little bit. There is, you have people who are religious, Jews, Christians, Muslims, all three, who believe in the literal truth of many of the stories in the Old Testament, right? And some of them, I think, are literally true, at least some of the information. But even the basics of whether or not Abraham was a real person, that's, there are questions about it. So I am going to ask you all to, because I know that many people in the audience are believers, and I know that many of you in the audience are not believers. So I'm going to ask you to just kind of suspend your personal bias for me during this conversation. Regardless of whether you're a believer or non-believer, let's just go through this. Okay. According to scholarship, Abraham lived about 1800 BC. Abraham was a nomad. He moved around Mesopotamia. He eventually settled down in a land called Canaan. Abraham's firstborn son was Ishmael. Ishmael was the son of an Egyptian slave named Hagar. So Abraham's first son was Ishmael. Abraham's second son was Isaac. Isaac's mother was a Hebrew named Sarah. Now, Sarah was jealous that Abraham had this older son with Hagar, even though it was Sarah's idea in the first place for him to take Hagar for the purpose of trying to get a son. But Sarah demanded that Abraham expel Hagar, expel Ishmael, send them out into the desert, and that's what Abraham did. Years later, if we jump forward in time, Ishmael has 12 sons. The descendants of Ishmael's 12 sons, who were princes, those descendants include the Arab people. Arabs are part of the Semitic family just as much as Jews are. Arab Palestinians, most Palestinians are Arabs. So Arab Palestinians are Semites. So if someone says you're an anti-Semite when you're speaking in defense of Palestinians, just, you can remind them Palestinians are Semites. Now, Abraham's second son, Isaac, the one that he was going to sacrifice, he ends up having two sons, twins, Esau and Jacob. Jacob being the grandson, he has 12 sons of his own: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Gad, Asher, Dan, Naphtali, Joseph, and Benjamin. These are the 12 tribes. And the descendants of these 12 sons, they become known as Israelites. The reason they're called Israelites is because Jacob, his name was changed to Israel. In the Bible, God changes his name to Israel. So the sons of Israel are the sons of Jacob. They're called the Israelites, them and their descendants. So you've got Jacob, you've got his 12 sons. One of them, Joseph, gets sold by his brothers into slavery, the caravan going to Egypt. In time, this famine hits Canaan, the region that we generally today refer to as Palestine. That whole region, the whole Levant area right there. And when this famine hits, Israel and his 12 sons, they, just like many people in the region, the land went dry. They couldn't grow food, and they had to go to Egypt because Egypt had the Nile River. They were able to store more grain, and you would go to Egypt, trade what you had in exchange for grain. If you didn't have grain, then you could end up in servitude, working it off as payment. And so you have Jacob or Israel, his 12 sons, they end up in Egypt. So the story goes, over time, they and their descendants become slaves to the Egyptians. And it lasts for hundreds of years. Now, the 12 sons, their families start to grow. The family units develop. And so the large communities of each of these families, they're called tribes, the 12 tribes of Israel. Hundreds of years pass, about 400 years pass, and you get one guy in particular who becomes a really important figure. Whether he's historical or not is a matter of great debate among Bible scholars, but we'll just go with it. The guy's name was Moses. He was a descendant from the tribe of Levi. He ends up leading the Israelites out of captivity from Egypt, and they head back through the Sinai Peninsula back toward Canaan, where Abraham had come from a long time ago. Abraham started out over in Mesopotamia, went up to Haran, came down into Canaan, then in Egypt, and then back. So he's a nomad. He's all over the place, but they head back. But the Israelites did not immediately enter the territory or the region of Canaan. They spent 40 years because of disobedience, disbelief. God wanted the generation of disbelievers to die off before they entered Canaan. So they wander around either in the Sinai Peninsula or in the region there along the Red Sea. And the successor to Moses was a military leader named Joshua, which, by the way, just as a complete aside, Joshua is actually the name of Jesus. Jesus in Hebrew is Yeshua, which is Joshua. When you take the romanization of Yeshua, it ends up becoming Jesus. Nobody ever called Jesus Jesus. His name was Yeshua, which is Joshua. So Joshua leads the Israelites back into Canaan, but there are people there, people that have been there for centuries upon centuries upon centuries. The Canaanites. It's not just one group of people. It's people who are all related, Semitic peoples who are all related by blood. They're cousins. They're all interrelated, but they have formed their own different tribes and units, but they're scattered throughout. They're called the Canaanites. Actually, most Bible scholars today believe that that's where the Israelites came from, that they were just one of many Canaanite groups, pastoral farmers and sheep herders that grew and kind of, anyway, I won't get off on that tangent. But anyway, the Bible tells the story that Joshua leads the Israelites on a military conquest of Canaan. and it is fair to call it a genocide. It's ethnic cleansing because they removed the people from the territory, but they didn't just force them out and send them off somewhere else. God told them to kill everyone, kill the women, kill the children, kill the animals, certainly kill the men. So it's a campaign of genocide. The Canaanites had been in this land before the Israelites came along. They were there all throughout the time that Israelites were there. And they were certainly in the land during the time that the Israelites were slaves for centuries over in Egypt. But here come the Israelites, and they say God wants them and them alone to have all the land. And that's why they're justified in ethnic cleansing and genocide and stealing the land from the Canaanites. So they take the land by force. They carve up the territory from basically, the northern part went up to basically the border of where Lebanon is today, down to the bottom of the Gaza Strip, near Egypt, near the Sinai Peninsula. They chop it up, and each of the 12 tribes is given a geographical area in which to live. Actually, the Levites didn't get a portion of land. They were the priestly class. They had certain duties and were to be taken care of by the people and so forth. So it was a little different. But the tribe of Judah ends up being given land around what is today Jerusalem. And the reason that they got that land is because among the 12 tribes, Judah was the largest as far as the population. Now you have to understand, these stories were written by exiles from the tribe of Judah during Babylonian captivity. So you have to take a lot of this with a grain of salt. The victors get to write the history. But we'll take it at the Bible's word that Judah was the largest tribe, and that's why they got the area around Jerusalem. They didn't immediately get Jerusalem itself. It took a good while before they were able to get Jerusalem, but they had the territory around it. Now, during all of this time that this is happening, you have prophets, and they're telling the people, you don't need to have a king. You have Yahweh as your king. He is your God. You should be loyal to him and him alone. You don't need a king. The Bible says that the Israelites were like, no, 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 no. All the other nations around us have these political states. They have kings, and we want a king. So until that day eventually came, the way that their political system worked was they functioned as separate tribes. Each tribe kind of doing its own thing, its own internal leadership. From time to time, you would have certain things that would pop up that would necessitate having a leader over the whole group of the 12 tribes, a common leader who would fill a temporary leadership role. And this role would be to do things like settling intertribal disputes. If there was a major dispute between tribes, someone would have to determine who was right, who was wrong. You would, in times of war, if there was an invasion and the 12 tribes had to have someone unite them and lead. So these leaders were called judges. And one of the most famous ones was Samson, who you've probably heard of, the guy who loved to go around murdering Philistines for fun, and who gets his hair cut off and loses power and eventually commits suicide in the process of committing mass murder against a bunch of Philistines. But anyway, and he was from the tribe of Dan, by the way, that one. You had Deborah and other leaders who filled in temporarily as judges. But the Israelites want a king. So they put aside the counsel of the prophet Samuel, demand a king, and Samuel says, fine. And they choose from the tribe of Benjamin a guy named Saul. Saul becomes the first king of the people, of the 12 tribes. And it was when Saul became king that the kingdom of Israel was formally established. Scholars put this at 1030 BC, or at least Bible scholars. Secular scholars can't date it to that because there's no verifiable evidence of it. But Bible scholars date it to the establishment of the kingdom of Israel to 1030 BC. Now, there are some scholars who put it 20 years earlier than that, at 1050 BC. So I'm just gonna do that. We'll use that. And to the guy Craig Herbert out there calling me a blasphemer, man, you are the kind of person I'm speaking to. So I hope you'll stick around because I'm going to educate you. All right, 1050 BC. We'll use that. Capital of the new kingdom is located in Jerusalem. Now, this is the first time ever that the Israelites considered Jerusalem to be their national capital. Saul becomes king. He gets in trouble because he's not going along with genocide sufficiently. Samuel gets mad, finds that Saul and his armies have kept some people alive that they were supposed to have wiped out. So Samuel takes a sword, chops up this rival king, and says, from now on, there's going to be a new king. And so he goes and he anoints with olive oil a guy named David, young kid. And David is the one that we hear about in the stories. He goes to take some food to his brother who's in the Israelite army. You've got the Philistines over here, camped up on one side, Israelites over here. There's a kind of a plain, a valley down below. And each day this Philistine, a giant from Gath named Goliath, and he comes down and he taunts the Israelites. King Saul is afraid. All of the people are afraid. Nobody wants to go fight this guy. The deal is, if one Israelite can come and engage in mortal combat with Goliath and defeat him, then all of the Philistines will become the slaves to the Israelites, and vice versa. So nobody can fight this giant. He's over 9 feet tall. Then here comes this little shepherd boy who can't even wear armor on him. It's too big for him. He takes some stones, takes a sling, goes down there, pops Goliath in the head, knocks him out, goes over, takes Goliath's sword, chops his head off, and the Philistines go fleeing. Now that's the story. David eventually becomes the king after Saul tries to kill him a handful of times. David is now king, and he is trying to expand the territory, grow the region of Israelite control. David is a murderer. He's an adulterer and a murderer. He's up on the roof one day, looks over, sees this beautiful woman, gets really randy, wants to have her for himself, and he summons her, gets her pregnant, and then her husband comes home from war. Well, this isn't going to work because she's pregnant. So what David does is he takes this man and he sends him to the front line, knowing that the guy's going to get killed, and he does. And the woman has his baby. David's son, who takes over Solomon, he's no better. I mean, he's said to be a wise king, but he's apparently not very wise because he has 1,000 wives, roughly 300 wives, 700 concubines from all these nations giving him wives as gifts, trying to form alliances. But they all have different religions that they believe in. And he worships their gods. He turns his back on the one true God. But he does build this great temple. Now, Solomon was such a creep to the people that after he dies, there's civil war. Oh, I'll mention this real quick. The territory has expanded, but no matter how hard they tried, the Israelites could not conquer one particular territory. It was down on the coastline of the Mediterranean. It was a strip of land known as Philistia. It's where the Philistines lived. They could not beat them. They never did conquer Philistia. Now, today, we call that territory the Gaza Strip. That's the Gaza Strip is ancient Philistia. Anyway, I think it's interesting trivia. And it was the Romans who, years later, controlling this region, they renamed the territory Philistia. They called the inhabitants of this region Philistines. And the word Philistine, when you transliterate it into English, it's Palestine. But Palestinians don't say Palestine; they say they're called Philistines or Philistinians. Philistine. But going back in time, after Solomon's death, there's this civil war. Taxation and other things were a big problem. And so you have a split in the kingdom. And this civil war splits the nation in a way that is irreversible. They never go back to being a united kingdom. The civil war is in 930 BC. And that is the year that Bible scholars understand that the unified kingdom of Israel ceased to exist. Jerusalem, therefore, was the capital of a political state called Israel for approximately 100 to 120 years. So it is factually incorrect to say that Jerusalem was the capital of Israel for thousands of years. It was not. The Bible does not say that. And if you think it does, you need to go back and reread it and actually learn your Bible rather than just repeating Zionist talking points. Now, I'll add that from the perspective of historical and archaeological scholarship, most scholars don't even believe that the Davidic and Solomonic United Kingdom, this grand golden age that's depicted in the Bible, they don't believe it ever existed because there's just no evidence of it. There is a vast archaeological record that does support a lot of what is in the Bible. A lot of the towns, a lot of the time periods, there's just massive amount of archaeological evidence. There is not a vast amount of archaeological evidence, virtually nothing, to support these stories about the grand kingdoms of David and Solomon. Many Bible scholars think of this Davidic kingdom, this golden age grand kingdom, kind of like the mythic tales of King Arthur. There may have been a David, just like there may have been someone that the King Arthur tales are based on. Not saying there was never anyone. In fact, in just recent years, they finally unearthed the very first piece of archaeological evidence mentioning the kingdom of David. So there was something. It was not what it's blown up to be. Just kind of like the fabled Camelot of King Arthur. There was probably something that these tales are based on, but it was not of the epic grand scale. If it was, there would be an archaeological record. But like I said earlier, I just want to take this show and take the Bible at face value, because we can take it at face value and refute the claims of the Zionists, because the Bible does not say what the Zionists say that it does. So you've got this civil war between the North and the South, and two nations emerged. You have the northern kingdom of Samaria. You have the southern kingdom of Judah. Jerusalem had been capital of this united kingdom. It went from being the United Kingdom's capital to being the capital of the southern kingdom, the kingdom of Judah. Judah consisted really just of Judah and a part of the small tribe of Benjamin, and a few Simeonites mixed in there. But really, it was Judah and part of Benjamin. That's the southern kingdom. So where is this united nation of Israel? It doesn't exist. Israel was a body of 12 tribes. The kingdom of Judah was not called the kingdom of Israel. That kingdom ceased to exist in 930 BC. So those who say that Jerusalem has been the capital of Israel for the last 3,000 years, they have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. The Bible doesn't say that. It's not my personal opinion. Historians do not claim that Jerusalem was the capital of the kingdom of Israel for more than 100 to 120 years, because that's only how long that kingdom lasted. So whether you approach the issue from a biblical standpoint or a historical viewpoint, the result's the same. Jerusalem's not the capital of Israel for more than about a century to 120 years. Not for thousands of years, certainly. Now, let's expand the argument, because the northern kingdom of Samaria was also referred to as the kingdom of Israel, kind of like Neo-Israel. You could argue, fine, well, the kingdom of Israel continued to exist, even though there was a civil war and they split. Sure, but there is no scholar anywhere who would claim that that northern kingdom, whether you call it Samaria or Israel, that Jerusalem was its capital. And that's the argument of the Zionists, that there has been, that Israel has had Jerusalem as its capital for thousands of years. It's a historical fact that Jerusalem was not the capital of that northern kingdom. Jerusalem was the capital of the southern kingdom. It was Shechem that was the capital of Samaria. But let's keep going. We'll look at the rest of the Zionist argument as it relates down to this southern tribe, this southern kingdom of Judah. Because if I'm making the argument, a better argument is not that Jerusalem was the capital of Israel for thousands of years. That's just ridiculous. But that Jerusalem was the capital of the Jewish people for thousands of years. I could respect that argument a little bit better, but it's still incorrect, and I'll prove it to you now. From this 930 BC civil war until 720 BC, remember, when we're talking about BC or BCE, before Common Era, the numbers go down as you get closer to modern day rather than going up. The kingdom of Samaria, the kingdom of Judah, they fight each other. They hate each other. They don't get along. They actually reach out to other nations and ask other nations to come and ally with them to fight each other. They hate each other. The Old Testament contains the writings of prophets who lived in the different kingdoms. Again, it may be because of who wrote these stories that it turns out that almost all the time the kingdom of Samaria, the northern kingdom, is just, they're terrible. Their kings are all rotten. Nobody believes in Yahweh. It's just a big mess. Nothing but pure evil the whole time. You've got Isaiah and other prophets up there warning them. But what ends up happening, and this is proven by historical record, not just biblical record. In 720 BC, the northern kingdom of Samaria was absolutely wiped out, utterly wasted, destroyed by the Assyrian Empire. And the Assyrian Empire, they were based, they're kind of up, you've got Nineveh was their capital. It's roughly what you might call modern day Syria. Okay, it overlaps. It went further than that, but just think of where Syria is up there. So the Assyrians come in, they destroy Samaria. Archaeology proves this, anthropology proves it, history, the science of history proves it. And the inhabitants of this northern kingdom, they were removed. They took them out of the land, which was the practice of the Assyrians. You take them out of the land. They were sold off as slaves into other lands. They were scattered apart, never to exist as a nation again. And that's why they're called the 10 lost tribes. The southern kingdom, Let's talk about them. 720 BC, Northern Kingdom is wiped out. Moving forward, Southern Kingdom of Judah survives a little bit longer. Not a whole lot longer, but a little bit longer. And during that time, the Babylonian Empire has risen to prominence. They have vanquished the Assyrians. The Assyrians had all kinds of internal conflicts. They eroded from within. Babylon took advantage of it. But they replace the Assyrians as the big power in the region. And they, at the time of the conquest of Judah, they're led by a king named Nebuchadnezzar, King Nebuchadnezzar. And he goes in and he destroys Judah in 589 BC, 587 to 589 BC. Babylon gets purged. Babylon purges purges Judah of its inhabitants. They take the people out, they take them captive back into Babylon. This is a region today that we know as Iraq. So for the next century, these exiled Judahites, they were not called Jews at that point, these exiled men of Judah or Judahites, they no longer have control over the lands of the northern Galilee, which is the old north part of the kingdom of Israel. They don't have control over the central Sumerian region. They don't have control over the southern Judean region. They have no control over Jerusalem because it's been turned to rubble by the Babylonians. So the kingdom of Israel no longer exists. The kingdom of Judah no longer exists. They're captives in Babylon. So you've got them there. It was during this Babylonian captivity, during that period, when a lot of the Old Testament was written. The priestly class, they took some of their own stories that they had, their own traditions, and they expanded on them. They reinterpreted them. But they also took some of the stories and myths of the Babylonians and they rewrote them to suit their own purposes. That's where you have, like the story of Gilgamesh, some of these old Mesopotamian stories. They get repurposed. The Garden of Eden story, a lot of these that were known among historians as having predated the Israelite versions or the Judahite versions. That's when a lot of the Old Testament is written. And let me read to you, just in case you're like, oh, what are you talking about? The Bible is always there. Here's what the Encyclopedia Britannica says on the topic of the Babylonian exile. It says, the Babylonian exile marks a dividing point in Old Testament history. To this period is ascribed the beginning of the compilation of significant portions of the Old Testament and of the organizing view behind it. Because during this time, there's a growing nationalism, or the sense of what happened. If we were God's people, if we were chosen and special, what happened? Is it that our God failed us? Was our God not powerful enough? Because that's what the Babylonians were telling them. So you have to just look at it. Well, what happened? Well, what happened? If it's not God, then it must be us. We were wicked. We were not strong enough. We were not faithful enough. And so what the Encyclopedia Britannica says here, and what Bible scholars say as well, is that this event, the exile, really colored a lot of the interpretation and the writing of the Old Testament stories. Rather than a lot of these being stories that were always the same, thousands of years ago, this is what the stories were, and they just got passed down. Somehow we end up with it and nothing's changed. Rather than that being the case, they went back and they created a history. Or they took things, even if you want to say that things really happened, they took it and they gave it a spin. They showed, here's the kingdom of Israel. This is why they collapsed, because they were not obeying Yahweh. and they were wiped out by the Assyrians. The reason that they were wiped out is because they were not obedient to these laws and so forth. We were good for much longer, and now we have to obey these laws. There was an emphasis on circumcision in a way that had not been common among the people. There was an emphasis on Sabbath day worship and the creation of more and more rules and laws. A priestly class really started to develop. You have the development of Judaism, which was very different from the common belief systems of the people in the centuries prior to that. And this is all happening, it's percolating, it's growing during this time that they're in exile. Now, eventually, what ends up happening is the Persian Empire replaces the Babylonians as the dominant power there in the region. And according to the Bible, the Persian emperor allows, King Cyrus, he allows a remnant of the people of Judah to go back to their former lands and start rebuilding the walls, try and rebuild the temple. But keep in mind, this was only a remnant of the people. They returned after about 70 to 100 years of slavery. Okay? So 100 years has passed. And as they start filtering back into the land, they found that in that intervening century, other people had moved in, mostly the Samaritans. So when you read the New Testament, the Jews in Judea do not have good relations with the Samaritans. The Samaritans were the remnants of the northern kingdom of Samaria that the Judahites had been at war with for centuries. But some of the Samaritans were also, you also had Canaanites who had lived in the area for a long time. They filtered back into the lands that they had been displaced from. The point is, when this remnant of Judahites began re-inhabiting the land, coming back from their exile, they were not exclusive in the land. They had to intermingle with other people, and that led to friction. It led to animosity. I want to just go down one side street for just a second and interject one thought about these people, the Judahites. They were not referred prior to this period. They weren't called Jews. When you look in the Bible, they're not called Jews. They were called men of Judah, Yehuda, but they were not called Jews, at least not widely until after this return from captivity. I've got a quote from the Hebrew Shalom Hartman Institute. This is what their website says. The term Jew was not used as the collective name for the residents of the kingdom in its early stages. Other terms were used, in particular, men of Yehuda. After the return from exile, the name came to mean every Jew, wherever he was, without any connection to his tribal origin. Now, here's what that means. After a century of exile, the Judahites, along with a mingling of the non-Judahite peoples, among whom they had been living with in Babylon, they come back into the old land of Judea. They find that there are Samaritans there and Canaanites there. They intermingle with them. And you now have, I don't want to use the word mutt in a pejorative way. I don't mean that at all. But it's kind of a mutt, a genetic mutt. All of these different Semitic and Levantine peoples starting to mix together, with the Judahites being the majority of them, but still, they're no longer just a tribe of Israel, is what the Shalom Hartman Institute is explaining. So the term Jew does not mean necessarily that you're even from the tribe of Judah. That's what it's saying. So you can be a Jew and not necessarily even be fully a full-blooded descendant of any of these 12 tribes. Probably, most of them are, but not all of them. And that's why the term Jew refers to all the people, regardless of whether or not they were literally people of Judah or not. So you've got this melting pot of Levantine peoples called Jews, and this new blend of people is who we have in the area of Judea, what used to be the kingdom of Judah. Now, the original promise that Christians so often paraphrase, that God gave the land to his chosen people, the Jews, we have to evaluate that, because that's not what the Bible says. The Bible does not say that God gave the land to the Jews. And I defy anyone out there to show me a Bible scripture where it says God gave the kingdom of Israel to the Jews, or all of the lands of Palestine to the Jews. It doesn't say that. What we do read back in Genesis is that God determined to call out a special people for himself. And through this special people, he is going to bless the whole world. Starting in Genesis chapter 12. I will make you, this is God speaking to Abram before his name was changed to Abraham. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great. I will make you be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you. Who? Abram. And whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. That does not say that God's chosen people are the Jews. Chapter 15 reads, in the same day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, unto thy seed have I given this land, from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates. Now, I want you to note that the covenant that God made to Abram, unto thy seed I have given this land. I want you to remember, Abraham had 2 sons. He actually had several sons, but the most notable were Ishmael and Isaac. The covenant did not make any mention of how the land was going to be distributed between Abraham's seed. So it is very selective to take all of this land that was promised to Abraham's and his descendants, cut out all of the descendants of Abraham's son Ishmael, cut out the 10 tribes of the northern kingdom, take a remnant of just one of those tribes, the Judahites, a tribe that ended up intermingling with non-Israelite peoples, and draw from all of this the conclusion that God promised to Abraham's descendants. This promise can only apply to one genetically intermingled faction, a faction which today polls show have a strikingly significant disbelief in the existence of God. I'm not talking about the Orthodox Jews. This belief that Jews are preferred by God above all others, this belief is endemic among the Israeli population to this day. They've been taught this for years. According to the Israel Democracy Institute, about 2/3 of Israeli Jews believe that they are God's chosen people, even the atheists. I've posted before, Gallup conducted a religiosity poll a few years ago, sampled thousands and thousands of people, and determined that Israel has the highest rate of disbelief in God than any of its, in proportion to its population. Highest rate of disbelief in God than any of its neighbors in the region. Now, in the Bible, when you read it, God always tells his followers, the Israelites, he always tells them they have to believe in him, that he is a jealous God. They must believe in him exclusively. They must obey him strictly in order to have his favor. So you have to ask, what happened? Did God change his mind? Did he realize that he was wrong? Did he realize that all that time that he was saying, to be my chosen people, you have to obey me. To get my favor, to get the land, to get the promises, you have to obey me. You have to be a light to the world. Did he realize that not only does his chosen group not have to obey him, but they don't even have to believe that he exists? And they will remain in perpetuity his favored people above everyone else, and they can have carte blanche to massacre anyone else who's in the land? It just makes no sense. There's no logic in it. It defies logic, and it certainly requires a wrenching distortion of the Bible, of what the Bible actually says, to conclude that there are different factions of Jews. You've got, for example, the Ashkenazi Jews who are from Europe. Genetics has proven that they have a marked different origin than the ones that come from Spain, the ones that remain in the Middle East. Very different. So how is it that European colonialists, who don't have anywhere near the level of Semitic bloodline as the Semitic Arabs do, the Palestinians, who actually are Abraham's descendants, how is it that God gives them control over the land? It just doesn't make any sense. And further, like I said, this promise given to Abraham about control of the land, it was not unconditional. The Jewish Museum of London said this, quote, "The covenant to Abraham is a promise that God made. According to the covenant, God would offer protection and land to Abraham and his descendants, but they must follow the path of God." As I've already mentioned, Israel is by far the most atheistic nation in the entire region. They certainly have a very distinct religious group. I'm not saying that there are that nobody's religious. That would be insane. Of course, they're religious in Israel. Hey, anybody can see that. But in proportion to the population, practicing believers, it's the most atheistic in the entire region. Zionism is dominated by unbelieving secularists. It was unbelievers who founded the Zionist movement and pushed it. So the Israeli state today, certainly, you can't say that they're following the path of God, which is a requirement of this promise of the land. It's just preposterous to suggest that God wants the Israelis to go around dropping bombs and missiles and massacring thousands of Palestinian children who are their cousins, their fellow children of Abraham. Does God want that? Of course not. But let's get back to the return of the Jews from Babylon, because I want to talk about that for a minute more. So you have the Jews coming back from Babylon, going back into the region, and compounding the problems that they have with their Samaritan and Canaanite neighbors, was that despite being allowed to return to the territory and start rebuilding, the Judahites were forbidden from reestablishing a political state. The Persian Empire that controlled the land, they didn't allow it. And when the Greeks supplanted the Persians, the Greeks didn't allow Judah to have a nation state of its own. The Greeks were replaced by the Romans. The Roman Empire certainly didn't allow the Jews to establish a political state. Now, you did have, while there was kind of a transition period there, you had a period of decades following the Maccabean revolts when a family, the Hasmonean dynasty, they had semi-autonomous control over the city of Jerusalem for a period of decades, but the Romans turned it back into a client state, and they installed the Herodians as governors. And this you would be more familiar with from the Bible, because this was the state of affairs at the time of Jesus. You've got Herod the Great as the regional governor that was appointed by Rome. So the historical fact is that there was no nation of Israel with Jerusalem as its capital after 930 BC. It's a historical fact. It's also confirmed by the Bible that after 589 BC, there was no Jewish nation with Jerusalem as its capital, unless we were to count that semi-autonomous Hasmonean period. But even during the time of Jesus, who was killed, give or take a few years, killed around 33 AD, they didn't have a formal nation of Israel. They didn't have a formal nation of Judah. It didn't exist. Jews lived in the land, sure, but there was no independent state. It was really no different than how the Palestinians today, they live in the land, but they're denied from having a political state of their own that is recognized. Ask any Jew, any Zionist Jew, if Palestine is its own legitimate nation. They're going to say, of course not. You see this in social media all the time, mocking and laughing. Oh yeah, show me Palestine on a map, stuff like that. But by the same interpretation, taking that same argument, that same reasoning, the Jews at the time of Jesus didn't have a nation of their own, let alone a nation called Israel, a political state. In fact, if you take the time to read what the New Testament says, what was it that got Jesus sentenced to death by the Romans? The scriptures claim that the corrupt bureaucracy, the Jewish priests and their politicians, falsely reported to the Roman authorities that Jesus was trying to get himself crowned as the king of a new Jewish nation. That's what we read in the Gospels. Pontius Pilate questions Jesus about it. Jesus says his kingdom is not of this world, right? So the accusations, if this is a true historical account of what actually happened, the accusations against Jesus by the Jewish leadership proves to us that they knew and they acknowledged that they did not have their own nation. And if you don't have a nation, you don't have a national capital, which means that Jerusalem was not the capital of Israel. It was not the capital of Judah. They tried to establish their own nation through rebellion, but they failed. And when the Jews rebelled against Jesus, predicted this. When the Jews rebelled against the Roman Empire and did try and reestablish their own autonomous government in the year 70 AD, what happened? Rome came in, they wiped out the Jews, they destroyed the temple, they destroyed everything in Jerusalem, they razed it to the ground. Not one stone was left on top of another. It was left desolate. Those Jews who were not slaughtered by the Romans, they fled into other lands. They left Jerusalem empty of any significant Jewish presence. That was around 70 AD. Go all the way forward to the 1890s, to the early 1900s, when you've got Theodore Herzl and the Rothschild family and the Zionist network, and they're pushing this effort to swamp the region with Jewish migration from Europe to justify the creation of this Jewish-only state. There still was not a significant presence of Jews at that point. This is not a matter of personal opinion. These are facts. This is acknowledged by historians. So I want you to remember, when you hear Zionists, especially the well-intentioned but biblically ignorant Christian Zionists, make the fake claim that Jerusalem has been the capital of the Jewish people for 3,000 years, I want you to remember the facts presented in this video. I want you to remember that the Bible does not support those claims. It's easy to repeat talking points. That does not make them true. So Christians, I want you to make a choice. You can believe your talking points, or you can believe the Bible. Which side are you going to stand on? You can't have it both ways. The Bible does not support the claim that Jerusalem has been the capital of Israel for 3,000 years. Jerusalem was the capital of possibly a fabled United Kingdom of Israel, but we'll go with it, say it was real, a United Kingdom of Israel from 1050 BC to 930 BC. It's a period of 120 years. Later on, it was the capital, Jerusalem was the capital of the Kingdom of Judah from that 930 BC civil war to Judah's destruction and by Babylon in 538 BC. Centuries later, we'll even toss in that limited autonomy from roughly 110 BC to 63 BC, when the Hasmoneans had 47 years of partial control. So what the Bible says is that Israel, as an independent country with Jerusalem as its capital, was 120 years. The separate kingdom of Judah had Jerusalem as its capital for 392 years. And then we'll toss in that 47 Hasmonean period. Now, taking those different periods of various kingdoms, not even the same political states, if we lump it all together, it only adds up to 559 years. Now let's take this one more step. Zionists might argue, they may say, well, it doesn't matter if they had political control or not. You know, they may say, all right, we'll use that argument against the Palestinians, say they don't have a state because we don't recognize it. But we get to enjoy that status, okay? Fine, whatever. We'll let them do that. They say all that matters is that Jews and their Israelite ancestors lived in the land, even if it was off and on. They lived there for thousands of years. Therefore, the land belongs to the Jews. Well, that same argument can be used to say that the true owners of the land are not the Jews, but it's the Canaanites and the Canaanite descendants. Who were the Canaanites? They lived in the land before Abraham was even born. Canaanites lived in the land before the 12 tribes stole the land from them. Canaanites, including the Philistines, they continued to live in and around the land throughout the kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Judah. All throughout that time. They lived in the land when the Israelites were scattered. They lived in the land when the Jews were taken into exile in Babylon. Let me see here. I've got an article from, this is from 2020, from American Friends of Hebrew University. Quote, a scientific report published today reveals that the genetic heritage of the Canaanites survives in many modern-day Jews and Arabs. Now, I looked up the actual report. Maybe I'll put the link up later on from cell.com. Here's from the report, DNA analysis. That what they did was they took 73 individuals from 5 different archaeological sites from the area. They extracted DNA, and this is what they found. The inhabitants of the southern Levant in the Bronze Age, Bible times, are commonly described as Canaanites. That is, residents of the land of Canaan. Canaanites are referred to as the pre-Israelite inhabitants of the land. Now, another Jewish source, Haaretz, longest running Jewish newspaper in Israel, quote, most of today's Jewish and Arabic-speaking populations share a strong genetic link to the ancient Canaanites. Now, why am I bringing this up? What does this mean? Canaanites lived in the land before, during, and after the Jews did. Modern Arab Palestinians, just like many Jews, contain high levels of Canaanite DNA. Now, the Jews were purged from the land, first by the Babylonians, then by the Romans. Skip forward some time, the Arab conquests of the Holy Land, results in a lot of the Canaanites intermarrying with the Arabs. So since the Middle Ages, Arab Palestinians have been the overwhelming majority of the population of Palestine. For example, in the 1500s, there were about 145,000 Muslims, mostly Arabs, only 5,000 Jews. In fact, there were actually more Christians in Palestine than Jews, and that remained the case for hundreds of years. Go up to 1890. That's the time when the Zionists are really, Herzl and Rothschild are really starting to push emigration. There were 432,000 Muslims in Palestine, 57,000 Christians. They were Arab Christians, only 43,000 Jews. Even after the programs to relocate these European Jews to Palestine were in full swing, they remained a small minority in Palestine. And this was confirmed by evaluations by the British. During the Mandate period, they conducted multiple censuses. By 1931, there were 175,000 Jews in Palestine, 760,000 Muslims. They keep pushing. By 1947, this is a year before Israel declared independence, 630,000 Jews, but Muslims, Arabs, made up 1.2 million. So despite all of this migration that they were pushing, and this is well before World War II, well before World War II and Hitler and the Nazis and the final solution and all that. They were pushing really hard, these emigration plans. British records show that as late as 1948, Jews in Palestine had legal ownership of only 5% of the lands. Legal records exist to show this. So if we want to make the argument of who gets the land based on who has lived there the longest, the Palestinians win decisively because they have Canaanite blood. They are descended from Canaanites, a mixture of Arab and Canaanites. So push back. Again, this is one of those arguments where I don't agree with it. I don't think either side should be trying to make this argument that they get the land because they lived there longer, or they get the land because the Bible says so. But you certainly cannot make the argument that the Jews have the right to the land because they have lived there for so long. If you use that argument, they're going to lose every single time on that because the facts, they have lived there a long time in very small numbers for most of the time. I mean, very small numbers. That doesn't mean that, hey, you've got 3 to 5% of the population, therefore you get to take the land against the will of the 97% of the population. The truth is that Jews are genetically very similar to Palestinians, and this is what is so heartbreaking to me. They both have Canaanite DNA. And with Palestinians having had this continuous majority in the land for the last 1,000 years, while Jews were scattered into Europe and everywhere else, it's clear that Palestinians have a greater claim to the land. But I don't like that argument. I think it's absurd that in the 21st century, with the technology that we have, with the legal systems that we have, that disputes over land should be settled based on religious claims, none of which can be verified because there's no way to find out if God actually said this. There's no way actually to prove that there is a God in a way that could hold up in court. You don't go into court and argue based on religious claims. Nothing could be settled that way. You could never have a society work unless it was when you have competing religious claims. I mean, if someone says, hey, this guy stole my house, and the guy says, well, my God gave it to me, is the judge going to say, oh, I find in favor of the guy whose God gave it to him? You do have records, don't you? Well, I've got my religious texts that say so. Well, you can't argue that way. And you can't argue based on who's been here longer. Are we going to decide that the lands of America belong to the Scandinavians because Leif Erikson was here long before Columbus came along? Are Americans ready? Are you Christian Zionists ready to sign over the lands that you own in the United States? Are you going to give your lands over to the Native American Indians because the Great Spirit gave the land to them long before the white man arrived? Of course not. You don't actually believe these arguments when you apply it to yourself. It doesn't hold up. So likewise, the issue of the lands of Israel and Palestine can't be settled by an appeal to religious texts. What's needed is for representatives of the Israelis and representatives of the Palestinians, most likely with help from a truly neutral international mediator, to sit down and resolve the issue through peaceful dialogue. Neither side is going to get everything they want because of the practical reality of the demographics of the land. Neither side can say, oh, well, we've discussed it and we've agreed that the Jews are all going to leave. You're not going to have the Palestinians say, oh, you know what, we finally realized we're wrong and we should leave the land and give it all to the Jews. Neither side is ever going to agree to that. So just as ideological as that argument may be, I think it's a non-starter. It's never going to happen. It's unrealistic. So just set it aside. There's always going to be Jews there. There's always going to be Palestinians there. Both sides are going to have to set aside long-held grievances and compromise. Maybe a one-state solution, maybe a two-state solution, maybe there's some novel solution that has not been considered before, maybe some blending of it. But all of the hate-mongering and the propaganda and all the people in social media who like to cherry-pick facts and make these extreme statements about the other side because hyperbole gets the most clicks. Let's be honest. All of that stuff has to be tempered. This is really an international problem. You might not think so. Once in a while, I'll be checking my comments, YouTube comments, and see someone saying, oh, this is happening over there. I don't care. Who cares about this? The nations of the world are linked through alliances. We're linked through economic ties to this region because of oil, because of everything else. Global conflict can erupt from this issue. So we're all connected to it. It wouldn't take much at all to start the dominoes tumbling. Wouldn't take much before my sons, your daughters, get drafted into armed conflict. Because you know many of them would not return. It is not an exaggeration to say that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is so intense, it could develop into a full-scale thermonuclear war that would annihilate our planet. Why? Israel attacks Hezbollah. Hezbollah retaliates. Israel attacks Lebanon. Hezbollah increases its attacks. Iran gets involved. Israel goes and hits Iran. Iran and its proxies strike back. The United States gets involved. Syria is involved. Iraq is involved. Egypt and Jordan, I don't know if they'll ever have the courage to ever jump in again, but who knows, maybe they might. But you've got a lot of investment from Russia in Syria, in Iran. You think they're going to stand by and just let the United States wipe all of that power, all of the money they've invested into that region? You think they're just going to sit by and do nothing? So now you've got Russia and the United States. Remember Syria just a few years ago? We had U.S. fighter jets attacking proxies on the ground while Russian fighter jets were attacking proxies on the ground, back and forth in the same airspace. It was a miracle we didn't end up in direct conflict then. So does this issue matter to you? It should. It certainly matters to your family. It matters to your children. It matters to your grandchildren. Because if we don't deal with it, if our generation does not take action and come up with a cure for this crazy disease, it's going to be passed on to our descendants, and they are going to have to deal with it. Sometimes I feel like the issue can't be resolved, when I'm feeling just so frustrated with the intractable stubbornness of the two sides. But then I see things happen that reminds me, wait a second, yes, this can be resolved. I've been among the Palestinian people. I know that the common person wants a peaceful coexistence. They don't want to wipe out the Jews. I talked to farmers, olive farmers. I talked to legislators. I talked to the mayor of Ramallah. I talked to a Palestinian attorney. I talked to professors at Palestinian University. I talked to people on the street. Over and over and over, the message was the same. They don't want to drive the Jews out of the land. They want to coexist in peace. There were differences of opinion on how a political state should be set up, but they didn't want war with their neighbors. And I talked to Jews as well who have the same opinion. Some of the leaders are maniacs. Not some. Most of the leaders are maniacs. Certainly on the Israeli side, you've got these insane, mad, crazy people on par with what I of course wasn't alive during the World War II, but what I have learned about the Nazis, the mentality, the philosophy, the supremacy, it's alive and well. That kind of thinking is alive and well in the Israeli government, especially the current one. The Palestinians have got problems of their own. Hamas is too extreme. I think that Hamas is a symptom of the oppression, that's the military occupation and oppression. I think that support for Hamas would dramatically reduce if the Palestinians had their own sovereign state. And the Palestinian, setting aside the extremism of Hamas, they're in the West Bank. President Mahmoud Abbas he's got to go. This guy he's a Zionist collaborator. He literally sends the Palestinian police on raids with the Israeli police to suppress Palestinian protests and things like that. This guy is not truly a friend to the Palestinian people. So both sides have got political reforms that need to take place. Anyway, so those are some of my thoughts on this. I don't believe that the problem can be resolved through appeals to religious beliefs or religious texts like the Bible, and I don't believe it can be resolved by arguing who's been there longer. Because as I've presented tonight, you can make the claim in favor of the Palestinians very easy either way. And all it takes is someone else to come along and say, well, I disagree for this reason, this reason, this reason. And their opinion is as valid as mine, because it's a matter of personal interpretation, because these are not legal matters. These are matters of faith, matters of interpretation of historicity. So you can't resolve the problems that way. You have to go through a political process to resolve these matters. And that's why over in Ukraine, the stupidest thing that happened, and it happened very early on, was Vladimir Zelensky saying, I'm making it against the law, official policy, no negotiations with Russia as long as Putin is in power. If you don't negotiate, if you don't talk to your enemy, you can't resolve the problem. And that's why Ukraine has spent the last more than a year doing nothing but throwing its people into a meat grinder, sacrificing hundreds of thousands of people and making no progress whatsoever. War is not the answer. Violence is not the answer. Kidnapping people is not the answer. But the answer is also not standing by while you let your oppressor beat you. You have to resist. You have to fight back. That's what I think. Anyway, I haven't been following along a whole lot here in the text, in the chat. I hope you don't think that my intent was to get in here and debate religion. I've got no dog in the fight. You can believe whatever you want. I'm not saying who's right based on religion. I'm not saying who's wrong. I'm just saying there's a fair argument that can be made from different viewpoints, and this matter cannot be settled through religious arguments. Anyway, let me just put another plug in for Buy Me a Coffee. Here in a second, I'll take a question or two, and then I'll wrap it up after that. But if you want to put a question in the chat, I'll look at them here in a second. Let's see here. I'm just checking something real quick. On this Buy Me a Coffee, it doesn't always, you can make anonymous donations. So for the anonymous people that make donations, thank you. I can't thank you by name if I don't have a name, but all right. Well, I really hate that I can't get super chats. It sucks. They always took a huge chunk of it anyway. YouTube did, so it's not like I was getting all the money anyway. All right. Here, let me put the link in there again. Peace Earth says I don't see coffee button. Now you can also go to paypal.me/blackstoneintel, or you can sign up at Patreon, patreon.com/blackstoneintel. But lately people seem to have been preferring this Buy Me a Coffee option. buymeacoffee.com/blackstoneintel. All right, some questions here. Armin Terabellion says, do you condemn Hamas? Yes, absolutely. I am not a fan of Hamas. I never have been a fan of Hamas. There are good things that Hamas has done when it comes to distributing food, distributing welfare, trying to help the people out in that sense. But I first came to be familiar with Hamas during the Second Intifada when they were carrying out suicide bombings in Jerusalem. I condemned them then, and I condemn what they did on October 7th as well. I would not condemn attacks on the Israeli military. That is fair game. So I don't condemn Hamas attacks on military targets. I don't condemn Hamas for trying to tear down illegal barriers. I don't condemn them for taking actions to defend the people. But I don't I don't agree with any attacks on civilians. Civilians, non-combatant civilians, should be off limits. It is a real shame that Israel set up all of those kibbutzes between their military outposts and Gaza to use their own citizens as human shields, because you end up with things like this. What I will say about Hamas is I understand why they did what they did. The reasons for what they did, I agree with. The manner in which they carried out the attacks, I don't agree with, if that makes sense. I think that there are legitimate ways of fighting back if you're going to use physical means. But targeting civilians, I mean, look at it. Look at what the response is. Doesn't work. It doesn't work long term, and it results in conditions worsening so much worse than they were before. But the fact that it's an Islamist movement, just in general, while I respect the rights of people to choose whatever kind of government they want to, if they go to the polls and they vote for an Islamist government, so be it. But my personal opinion is that a religious-based government is not a good thing, and that applies to everywhere. But remember, Hamas is just one political party. In the West Bank, Fatah is the dominant party, and they're secular. There are Christian members of Fatah. Religion does not determine their actions. And I know I'm not seeing it in the chat, but I know that anytime that I say that, yes, I do condemn what Hamas did, so many people feel betrayed. Like, what are you saying? How can you say that, Jake? But I'm consistent. I would not approve of any attacks on civilians by the Zionists, and I don't approve of attacks on civilians by belligerents. Excuse me. Musa Real, thank you. Thank you so much for the donation. Excuse me. My voice is starting to wear out. I got to make sure I don't I don't wear it out too much, because I got to do that interview tomorrow. Hey, Iron Man Metal, thank you, brother. Also made a donation there. God bless Palestine. Love from Charlotte. Charlotte? Are you down in Charlotte? What? What are you doing in Charlotte? You're not from Charlotte, are you? Excuse me. Sorry if I'm coughing. They're too loud. Let's see. Bill asked, how are the olive farmers you were supporting a couple of years ago? Well, as far as I know, they're doing fine. They sent me pictures, which I've shared with you guys. We the Blackstone family, we did some fundraising and raised over $9,000 to help Palestinian farmers replace olive trees that had been cut down by settlers. Because the goal is you cut down the olive trees, and then the olive farmers can't make money, even though they and their families have lived in that spot for going back centuries. So by replacing the trees, it helps them to. It'll take a little while for the trees to grow, but at least it gives them a fighting chance. So I don't know. A lot of them were in Jenin, where the trees went, and Jenin has really been hit hard by Israel. But maybe I can reach out to the organization that actually got the trees to them and ask specifically how they're doing. I've not heard one way or another. Oh well, Bill, me and you'll have to get together sometime if you move to Charlotte. Well, we'll have to go out to eat or something sometime. It's like an hour and a half drive for me. I go down to Charlotte, well, usually once a month or so. Let's see here. Mario said, "This is why I left Christian Zionist doctrine." I I don't think that. And good. I was. I guess you could call me a Christian Zionist. I guess in the early days, but it only takes a little bit of study to figure out. Wait a second. What I'm being told about Israel is actually not correct. There's a lot of stuff about Israel that you mostly evangelical Christians believe that is not actually based in the Bible, but it's interpretations of uh, Schofield Bible interpretations and things that are taught by Zionist loyalists, the Hagis, and people like that. I've got a few relatives that are hardcore Zionists, but they don't have a clue what they're talking about. And the few times I've broached the subject with them, it's clear they have very strong feelings, but almost no understanding. And a lot of people, when you try and say, "Hey, can we talk through this?" They don't want it. No one wants to find out that they were incorrect about something. It's not easy. I'm the same way. Most everybody is like that. If you have believed something for a while, it's humbling to find out, oh jeez, I can't believe I believed that. I was so wrong about that. I was so wrong about that. Like you'll see people admitting now, oh geez, how could I have been so wrong about whatever, Bernie Sanders? You rarely see someone say, how could I have been so wrong about Donald Trump? The more hardcore you are, the more extreme you are in your belief system, the more detached from fact and reason you get, the harder it is to come back from that. So it's tough. It's really tough to take people and pull them away from their pet theories and beliefs and biases. So all you can do is present the information, and if they get exposed to it enough, and it hits them at the right time, then maybe they'll come around. But I don't wait for it. Through my social media accounts and YouTube and everything else, in the course of a year, I'll have talked to thousands upon thousands of people. And if I were to devote an inordinate amount of time debating everybody who wanted to do it, I would make no progress. So that's how I am on Twitter. When I'll post something and I know it's factually accurate, and then somebody with 2 followers will come along and say, you're totally wrong, and not add their reasons why or anything. Like, there's no point in debating them. It'd be a waste of time, because first you have to educate them and help them to learn. The worst people are the ones who are too dumb to know how dumb they are. The most ignorant are the ones who don't know how ignorant they are. I live knowing, I shouldn't say this because someone will cut it out and post it somewhere. I recognize as time has gone on how much lack of knowledge I have in certain areas, even areas that where I know way more than somebody else. There are people who know 10 times more than me. It's continual process of learning and reevaluating information, where we are in our personal lives, the events going on, the people we're connected to, the influences we have in our lives have an impact on how we think, and what we may believe today very strongly. A year from now, we may feel very differently about it. So rather than try and push people who are not ready, just give them the information, make your point, and let them disagree. Just move on. That's right. Armin says having followers doesn't mean you're correct. That's certainly true. Since October 7th, I have posted hundreds of tweets, and I get almost no views. I've got on my main account, I've got 24,000 followers, and it doesn't grow a bit. There's been no growth. In the past, during a big event like this, when I post, things get shared and I'll see a big boost, huge increase in followers during major events when lots of people are looking at it. Not anymore. Not anymore. It doesn't work. But I bring that up because I've seen accounts that are surging, that don't have the suppression on it that my account does. And they went from this to way up here. And I think, but what you're saying is just factually incorrect. It's just hyperbole. It's just grandstanding. It's just saying things, clickbait things, outrageous things. And they get thousands upon thousands of new followers. And I sit here thinking, intellectual information, it just doesn't pay. It doesn't pay. It's never paid. For as long as I've been YouTubing, since 2012, it has never paid to do things the way that I do, which is to try and be balanced, moderate, not use, not make things, not feed you fear porn, not feed you stuff that I'm, it's not that I don't know how to do these things. I watch the people around me that start out the same level as me and end up with hundreds of thousands of subscribers ahead of me. And it wouldn't be hard to duplicate what they do. But the cost would be I would have to put my head down on my pillow at night knowing that I'm chasing money at the expense of my integrity. And I would rather, spend 2 hours here doing a live stream and get, what is it now? Like two coffees, or, make about $10 rather than sit here and lie to you and tell you things that would be exciting, I guess, and get a bunch of money. I couldn't live with myself. I could be a terrible person. I have the knowledge, I have the understanding of what you do to get big, to get popular. But I'm too judgmental of myself to do that. So I'll stay poor. Maybe I'm not poor, but I'm not well off. I don't make a lot of money. Not at this. Not at this. In fact, it's because I was making almost no money at this, spending as much time as I was on making YouTube videos, um, making no money at it. I had to go back to doing more of what I used to do. I've got multiple income streams. I don't rely solely on YouTube. In fact, I haven't relied on YouTube for years. Um, but with as much time as I put into it, it is nice to get some, you know, some income from it, because there's no incentive to keep doing it in a big way if there's no, financial remuneration. Yeah, Steven Stern said I haven't wanted to name names, but yeah, Steven Stern has mentioned in the chat. Yeah, some of these people jump on an issue, whatever the hot topic is of the day, they'll jump on it, say a bunch of crazy stuff, and once the topic is over, people like me will still be here taking a stand for the Palestinian people, trying to do something. They'll be long gone off chasing the next dollar, and that's how the system works. Samuel asks, do you think the truth of Israel-Palestine is starting to become more mainstream in the Western world since October 7th? Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And that has been wonderful. Back in 2014, there was no discernible change, and that made me sick. The carnage, there were not as many deaths. There were, a few thousand deaths, and it was just as graphic and gruesome as it is now. It's just that now it's on a much greater scale. And if there is any silver lining in what's going on right now, it's that what Hamas did provoked such a massive response that from Israel. Israel has gone so far and lost its mind and thrown caution to the wind, and they have engaged in such atrocity that it has captured the attention of the world. It's shocking how much Israel has been able to get away with. And they're going to get away with a lot of this. They always do. But the tide is turning. One of the biggest changes has been this the younger millennials and the rising Gen Z. They don't put up with this crap. They don't care what their parents and grandparents think about Israel. They feel very different. And so that's a good sign of things to come. And I normally knock those generations on when it comes to a lot of social issues and things, and I think, oh geez, these kids. But it's true. And American Jewry is changing. The old system of just everybody being completely loyal to Israel. The liberal Jews in New York and elsewhere are not afraid to stand up to their Zionist brothers and sisters and say, look, you people are maniacs and you don't represent us. So that's very good. And I see nation after nation after nation, these videos of people by the tens of thousands pouring out in support of Palestine. Sports events, these football games in the UK and elsewhere. It's fabulous to see that kind of support, but it needs, and that's good, and it has its place. But we're still fighting against the political class that is financially beholden to the people that are pulling the strings, the AIPAC lobby especially, and the war industry. The war industry is making tons of money for every bomb that Israel drops on Gaza, the United States, they're like, all right, yeah, we'll that's one more for our military industry. We're going to send Israel more bombs, more missiles, more hardware, and we are going to give our war industry more money to send us new stock. And that's what we do with Ukraine as well. It's terrible. It's blood money. Yar Elohim asks, is the sleep paralysis doing better? Thank you for asking. Um, I have not had any more sleep paralysis since that one event recently. The sleep paralysis happens maybe once every couple months. It's not super often. But thank goodness I have not had any more incidents like that. He's, I think, referring to a few weeks ago when I woke up in a daze. I had had a brutal night terror and woke up and my body was paralyzed, but I couldn't think straight. I couldn't quite see. And I thought I misunderstood, thought I was in Gaza, thought that my children had been killed and that I had been paralyzed in a bombing and was in a hospital. Um, and it was horrible, horrible. Armin says, I remember the stream when you saw that somebody had shot at your house or something crazy like that. Oh yeah, it was right out here. It was about 2 a.m, but it came in the midst of a whole bunch of other things. That's when I was getting my tires slashed over and over again out in the driveway. Tires were blowing out on the road. That's the same time period when I had the feds on my case. That German national trying to set me up. The paramilitary creeps follow me into the movie theater. It was a bad time. It's also around the time that my CIA contact down the road, about 20 minutes away from here, was murdered. That was a rough time. And I still have, like, I have stashed all around me weapons. I've got everywhere, just like right here. I've got a machete right here. I've got a baseball bat. I've got weapons all around my house because when people start showing up at your home, it's anyway, crazy life. Was it after Las Vegas? Yeah. That was after the mess in Las Vegas. During the mess in Las Vegas, because the investigation that I was doing was ongoing at that time. And where I was at in the investigation was there were two main things that I was looking at that time. One was which organization was running the paramilitary unit that was on the ground causing chaos on the strip the night of the shooting, and trying to track them down. The other thing was, be careful, was trying to get proof of the agency that Paddock was twisting the screws, which agency it was that was twisting the screws on Paddock that kind of pushed him over the edge, or that contributed to it. It's one thing to say that I know it. It's another thing to have the evidence to prove it. And because the FBI was trying to push me into federal court to get the gag order. And they did have me under constant surveillance. That I posted the emails that I had gotten from my Freedom of Information Act request that showed that they had over 900 pages of data on me, surveillance and so forth, which could have been collected over a period of years. Some of it could have been from other investigations that I had done, other work that I had done, like out there with the Bundy Ranch and the Malheur mess out there in Oregon and all that. But anyway, that was a rough time. You don't show your cards until you can do it right. Because anybody can make an accusation. I'm not going to risk my life making an accusation that I don't have the evidence that I can use publicly. I get evidence, but a lot of times people feed you things that it informs you, but you can't use in court. You can't go public with it without getting in big trouble for it. There was one court case I was involved in where I had obtained absolute proof, dialogue between two parties. I had the emails of the correspondence, complete with the IP addresses and everything, but I didn't get the correspondence legally. It was surreptitiously obtained, and you can't use it. So you have to get evidence that can hold up. Otherwise, they just say, well, that was a lie. That's not true. They take you to court, gag you, and then throw the kitchen sink at you so that you're facing years in prison. Or you can recant and admit you lied and whatever, and make you come out and humiliate yourself, knowing that you're not lying. The lie is that you don't have the information. So it's when you go after the big guy, it's one thing to jibber jabber on social media. Political pundits can say whatever. Political candidates can fling whatever accusations. You get the low level operatives like Jacob Wall and Loomer and all these people who go and make outrageous accusations. Elizabeth Warren is she's getting ready to meet this guy for sex or whatever. You can go out and make your allegations, but it gets dismissed because you don't have anything to back it up. And if you face prison over making an allegation, you better have it right. And I did not have the evidence that I needed yet that I could put out in the public eye to defend myself with. But I was on it. I had a lot of information. But some of the key points, the ones that mattered. Anyway, and so there was the pressure, there was the threats, there was the intimidation, all of that. And they kept up, and for a while I was willing to keep going. I kept checking in with my wife. Are you still comfortable with this? She comes in, Jake, we got another flat tire out there. Cops here. It's embarrassing in a way, because we had, I live in this subdivision. I'm a corner lot. So I've got houses all up and down this four-way intersection, and I've got the cop cars out there over and over again. And of course they make a big deal of it. They're parked on the side with their lights flashing, and you know, like, how long before my neighbors start to think I'm beating my wife or something? But had to document this stuff so that if I ever did catch the party or parties that were doing the vandalism, I'd have a legal record. Plus, I wanted them to know I'm doing everything I can, and that's why I've got a security system around my house now. I've got video cameras all around the house and monitor it on my phone. What a mess. Friggin' mess. The stuff that they do. Frickin' criminals. But anyway, I wasn't getting enough super chats to be able to fight the FBI in federal court, so anyway. Let's see what else. Yeah, Bruce says feds have 6 ways to sign it to get you. I was familiar. I was used to the FBI doing this crap. I was used to it in my teens. Because my grandmother, they kept coming after her. And I've told those stories before, so I won't repeat it. But I remember the feds following us around, going out to dinner, Outback Steakhouse. There's the car. There's the feds. They followed us from the home, waited while we ate, followed us on the way back. They went after her a long time, and she was in and out of court. She was a judge, but she was having to go into grand juries, and they went after her hard. They got a bunch of her associates, some of her friends. They set them up, bribed them, tried to get them to flip on her. They never would. They couldn't get her. They didn't have dirt on her. They tried to get it, though. They used some heavy hitters to go after her, though. Manuel Noriega's dirty attorney, they had him try and set her up. Offered her $50,000 for the name of an informant to give to the mafia so they could knock the guy off. It wasn't real. It was a fake case that they set up. It was entrapment. Camel War said, "What did she do to piss him off?" She down in Miami. The judges down there, you run for office, and she had been a criminal court judge. She was very well known throughout the country. Oprah Winfrey had her on her show. She was on Donahue. She was on late night talk shows. One of People's People of the Year. She was a well-known person, and the FBI was going after people down there, trying to get. Usually, the FBI. Their main way of doing business is to create bad guys, to take people who are not committing crimes, try and entice them into doing something wrong, and then say, aha, here's a criminal, let's bust them. And the bigger the fish, the bigger the name, the better the promotion. And so they went after her, and they went after some other judges down there, and they just like with what they do with Trump, it's the same thing. The way the prosecutors have gone after Trump, it's very typical. You in a RICO case or anything similar, you got the big guy at the top, then you got the lower level people. You take one, get him on whatever, say we'll let the charges go, or we'll give you reduced sentence if you turn in the next guy. Give us dirt on who you know. So they flip, they get this guy. Then they repeat, do that, get this person. You keep going up until you've got, everybody's turning on everybody. And so that's what they did. They went all the way up to my grandmother, who was the most well known. They could not get her to take a bribe, and so they bribed some other judges. She had people I knew. They had been over to our house. I knew one of the judges performed one of her wedding ceremonies. I remember these people. I went to work with her all the time. She took me as a kid growing up. She took me to the courthouse, Miami-Dade courthouse, all the time. So I knew these people, and she got some of them. It was called Operation Court Broom. Court Broom, if you want to look it up. Operation Court Broom. They flipped they got a couple judges, but they could not get her. So they hounded her for years. This dragged on for years. And when they couldn't get her, it was they just were harassing. Hey, Armin says, just sent $25. Thank you. Woohoo. Thank you so much. I see it there. All right. And someone else, Nazi Hater, says, great show, Jake. Keep up the good work. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. But anyway, but then again, I've got contacts in the FBI who I consider to be white hats who want to do the right thing, and so it's it's nuanced. You can't hate them all. CIA is different. I've got a terrible opinion of the CIA, and I've got contacts in the CIA. One pair of CIA contacts I have, well, no, these guys are retired now, so I can say it. It's a husband-wife team. Husband-wife team. There's one very unique detail about them that if I mentioned it, then people, not you guys, but the wrong people could figure out who they are, so I won't say. Anyway, but I don't like the I think that CIA is just a plaything, a puppet, a paramilitary of the these globalists, their international intrigue and trying to break into new markets and steal resources. I think the CIA is horrible. During the Ron Paul run in 2008, do you think Io was stole from Ron Paul? Well, I was a writer for Ron Paul back in 2008 for his campaign, and I remember how close he came to winning the Iowa caucuses. Very close. And he stayed up there in the top 3 in a lot of those early primaries. And it depends on how you define stealing it. Yeah, it was stolen. When the media is purposely deceiving the public. Like when he came in second place, I think was it New Hampshire that he came in second? It's either Iowa or New Hampshire. Came in second place, and Fox News, and you can still find clips of this online. I think it was Fox. They reported the results, like first place, Mitt Romney. Third place, Rick Santorum, or whoever it was. And the real whatever is the person that came in fourth and fifth, blah, 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 blah. And they completely ignored the fact that Ron Paul, the one who was the anti-establishment candidate, had come in second place, and a close second. Yeah. That's when the media is trying to keep the public from knowing stuff like that. Absolutely. Now, did they rig ballots or anything like that? No, I don't think so. I don't think so. But But I do know that there was enough dirty trickery in the media that it was essentially a rigged election against him. There was no way Ron Paul was going to get it. It didn't matter that we were doing money bombs and things that were setting all-time records. It didn't matter that he had the most funding, the most individual donations from active members of the military of anybody, including friggin' John McCain. It didn't matter. The media would not report on it. Ron Paul loves drugs. Don't vote for him. Yeah. Ron Paul does believe that people should be able to decide for themselves, nonviolent crimes. If you want to use something, then that's up to you. That crazy freedom of choice thing. Yeah. They really savaged him in 2012. And so, like with Rudy Giuliani, the way they were accusing Ron Paul of being a terrorist sympathizer, nothing changes. Ron Paul was saying, look, we don't need to be in Iraq. We don't need to be in Afghanistan. We don't need to be engaged in all of this warfare around the world. And so in the Republican debates, you've got Rudy Giuliani. I demand that you take that back. How dare you? You're a terrorist sympathizer. You're taking your marching orders from Al Qaeda. And the audience just cheering that on. It's the same as today. Like, oh, you support the Palestinians. You love Hamas. You believe in beheading babies and raping women and all of this stuff. Just ridiculous. So I have a morbid satisfaction at seeing Rudy Giuliani really facing the music these days. Hopefully, I won't say anymore. I'll tick people off. I did like Rand. Yeah, I liked Rand Paul earlier, before 2016. After 2016, he's still pretty good on a lot of things, but I don't know. His Trumpism, I thought, was a big change from the way his dad would have acted. But, who can say? Stephen Stern, Jake, have you listened to Norman Finkelstein's position on Hamas? He likened the actions to a slave revolt. Thoughts? Yeah, which slave revolt was he talking about? I remember, what was that, the one he was talking about with the gladiators? Some of the gladiators broke out and then got more people and freed more out of the prisons, and then went out and attacked, killed a lot of people before eventually it was quelled. Yeah, I heard him talking about that. The whole Hamas thing it's very tricky because more and more governments around the world, including our own in the United States, are getting to the point where you cannot explore ideas without demagoguery and trying to connect you to things. We should be able to talk about Hamas. We should be able to talk about what they did, whether or not it was effective, and so forth. Taking either side of the argument, we ought to be able to do that openly without fear of being labeled a pro-Hamas terrorist sympathizer and have social media gang attacks against us, to where our employers get tons of calls. Did you know that your employee is out there promoting Hamas and saying he loves Hamas? Going to all of the income accounts, PayPal and Patreon and all that, and trying to get your accounts pulled. But that's the world we live in, where it doesn't matter if what the accusation against you, if it's legitimate or not. It's just an accusation has been made, and the corporation does not want to be affiliated in any way with someone who's being accused of something. And it's a terrible, terrible environment. It assassinates free speech. And when you don't have free speech, you don't have this exchange of ideas, and people don't learn, they don't grow. There's no coming to understanding of different positions. Everyone stays firm in their beliefs. Nobody grows because no one's allowed to safely talk and explore things. And so I really, really dislike that. But that's how it was after 9/11. You could not say, well, wait a second. Why did Osama bin Laden do this? Why did Al Qaeda do this? What are they so pissed off about? To even broach that, to even ask the question, was to invite just a mob of hate to be directed at you. And boy, did I get plenty of it back then. Oh, the Ned Turner revolt. Nat Turner and John Brown. Yeah. I think it was part of the same. I don't know if it's the same show or not. I've listened to several Norman Finkelstein interviews lately. Yeah. Nat Turner was seen as a terrorist back then. Finkelstein made the point that, in hindsight now, when we look back, it's not so clear. He's seen as a hero by some for what he did, but at the time it wasn't the case. And I think that he's making the point about Hamas. Hamas definitely is not this monster in the way that most people think it to be. Hamas started out as a religious group. They did not. They didn't have anything to do with militancy. There was no violence. But they were very much involved as a social organization, as a charity, helping people in their community. It was an Islamist group, but it wasn't radicalized yet. But that came with Israel pouring funds into Hamas to build up Hamas in Gaza as a counterweight to the PLO's Fatah party. So Hamas did and continues to do good things for their communities, but they do have the Al-Qassam brigade. If they're only going after the IDF, Israeli security forces that are maintaining the occupation, I say that's fair game. But when you and you can make the argument, all right, fine, look at what they did. They took hundreds of hostages, and the world is outraged at that. And I think the world should be outraged at that. The problem is, Israel is sitting right now with thousands of Palestinians in detention without trial, without being allowed to even know what the charges are against them. These military tribunals, they hold them as prisoners, including a lot of children. Is that not kidnapping? To go into a Palestinian's home in the middle of the night, bust the door down, grab people, take them off to prison, not allow them to even know what the charges are, and keep them sometimes for years. How is that not kidnapping? So how is it that kidnapping Palestinians is okay, but Hamas kidnapping Jews is terrible? Like, it doesn't make sense. to someone who looks at it in a fair-minded way. But the media does not present that balanced perspective. And that's the problem. And that's why we have to be so vocal in social media. And I'm telling you guys, doing it in an insulting way doesn't work. Now you can express outrage, and I do my fair share of clapping back at people that get snarky with me. But you win hearts and minds by being reasonable and rational, by presenting a well-articulated argument. And that's how you win people over, when they see that you're reasonable. Not everyone, of course, but everyone that we can peel away from the Zionist movement, the better. Yeah, it's absolutely horrible what they're doing to the Palestinians there. Well, and they've been doing it for years and getting away with it. But in the coming months, there is going to be a new slew of reports from all the ones we're used to seeing, from Amnesty International, from UNICEF, from various human rights organizations that are going to get in there and get on the ground and do investigations into Israeli war crimes. We could see some of this go to the International Criminal Court. The ICC can't actually enforce anything, which is why it's not like you're going to see Netanyahu hauled away or anything. It would take the international community to enforce the rulings of the ICC. And clearly the international community does not have the will to take actions like that. But we are going to see the development. It'll be slow, but over this next year, there's going to be a lot coming out, a lot of information coming out pointing to Israel's crimes. And what Israel will do is try and muddy the water. They'll try and stir things up. They'll do like they did to Goldstone, I mean, back when Goldstone was, he was a faithful Zionist, and he was appointed to investigate, I think it was Operation Cast Lead, some of the atrocities committed by Israel. And his report was very, very, very powerful against Israel, accusing Israel of heinous actions. And this report comes out. He wrote it with a couple other people. They published it, and they went after him, harassed the hell out of him, and he lost a lot. And eventually, he published a kind of a recantation, which nobody believed because he didn't provide any new information. And the people who had written the report with him, they said, we absolutely do not believe that he means this, but he's being pressured into this. So that's what Israel will do when these reports come out, is anyone that they can shame, anyone they can harass, anyone that the Zionists can just try and put over a barrel and get them to recant, they'll do it. But the volume of evidence that's going to come out against Israel this year will be substantial. It's going to be something that Israel's not used to having to deal with. And the administration of Netanyahu is going to change. The fear is, even though his government will come down, the fear is getting somebody in like him, Benny Gantz or somebody, I don't know. Really, what Israel needs is for the more peaceful left wing to somehow get some of their people in power. I mean, the crazy Zionists will assassinate them again, like they did Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin for negotiating, peace terms with Yasser Arafat. But anyway, there needs to be pressure, public pressure on Israel. Don't let it go. Armin says, so did Netanyahu attack Israel? I don't believe that. There's two ways of looking at it. Clearly, this October 7th attack serves Netanyahu and his administration's agenda in a big way to move forward with annexation, to move forward with ethnic cleansing in Gaza. There's a lot. I look at the billions of dollars that Israel's getting out of this, and it distracts the public's attention away from Netanyahu. Remember, just a few months ago, you had 100,000 crowds of 100,000 people at a time out protesting Netanyahu and calling for his resignation. So does this help Netanyahu? Yes, it does. Does that mean he planned it? No, I don't believe he planned it. I don't believe that the Mossad planned it. I think that the Mossad certainly knew about it. I think Shin Bet knew about it. Shin Bet is the Israeli version of the FBI, kind of more domestic. And I think that Netanyahu had plenty of information. There have been plenty of officials who have come out, Israeli officials who came out and said, we've been warning Netanyahu about this. He knew about some of this. So I believe he knew about it. I don't know that he was... I don't think that he knew how big it was going to be, because a lot of the people that ended up getting killed, what complicated this whole thing is that it was Israel's response that really escalated the death toll among the Jewish, the Jews in the kibbutz. Now, Hamas carried out huge massacre at the Nova festival. I've seen plenty of the videos. Horrific massacre. But when Israel finally responded and they came in with their Apache helicopters, they were blowing up cars as they were driving away. They didn't know if the cars had Hamas in it. They didn't know if it was Hamas driving with Israeli hostages. They didn't know if it was just Israelis. They just started blowing up the cars. They killed a lot of people. Same in the kibbutz. They killed a lot of people through the tank shelling. And the Israeli police forces, the security forces that went in there before the IDF got there. A lot of people caught in crossfire. I think that Hamas intended to take as many people back as hostages into Gaza to use in negotiations against Israel to try and get prisoners freed and things like that. And there have been, some Israelis who were hostages who have said as much. But I also know that Hamas did carry out a lot of killings, because I've seen the videos. I've watched hours worth of videos of Hamas in action. It's almost like they went in with one intention, and then this something changed, and I don't know. In the end, what matters to me is that they killed a lot of people. Yeah, Bruce says, I heard Egypt warned Israel a week prior to the attack. They warned repeatedly. They warned Israel's intelligence services repeatedly. Israel had every reason to be on high alert. And that's why it's I can't accept that the people at the top just had no idea this was coming. That's ridiculous. And I don't think that most Israelis believe that either. I've seen plenty of Israelis saying the same, making the same argument, the same point. Pork bacon for everyone. Hi, Jake. Wondering what's your opinion in regards to Dr. Shiva running for U.S. president despite being born in India. Seems that he's really serious about anti-Zionism as well. I don't know anything about it. I'll have to look that up. Sorry, I don't know if he was born in India, or if Dr. Shiva was born in India. Sorry. Constitution doesn't let someone become president unless they're a natural born citizen. If the parents were American citizens and they were on like a U.S. base or something, that would be different. I don't know the story here. But if he was just outright born in India, you can't be U.S. president. The Constitution forbids it, unless you're Barack Obama or something. I was kidding. I don't want to start that one. I believe Barack Obama was born in Hawaii. That was never the issue. I always thought that Trump, when he came along and was making the whole birther thing, jumping on into that, that wasn't the point. It doesn't matter if he was born in Hawaii. The problem is that you have to be a natural born citizen to be a U.S. president, and that's what it says in the Constitution. A natural born citizen means you cannot have dual citizenship when you're so he was born there. But the thing is, his dad, I believe it was his dad, was his dad Indonesian? Sotoro? I don't remember if it was I think it was Indonesian. But anyway, he was born, I believe that he was born with dual citizenship. And that's why, even though eventually a birth certificate was produced, it was not the original. The original would have the mother's name and where she's from, where she was a citizen of. There would be the father, and then his citizenship. And that is the problem. Obama was an American. He was born in Hawaii. That doesn't mean, though, that he could be president if he was born with dual citizenship. And that's why what was eventually put out, the document, the birth certificate that was eventually released, was not the original. It may have been a legal birth certificate, but it was not the original. So anyway, if that's the case, and we're just speculating, but if that were the case, that's the argument as to why it would have been an issue. And Trump always missed that. Trump's argument was always, oh, he wasn't born in America. And that was always a losing argument. But anyway, Netanyahu really got the best of Obama. Obama hated Netanyahu, and Netanyahu hated Obama. They despised each other. Netanyahu is the only person that I've ever seen sitting in the Oval Office next to a U.S. president telling off the president to his face. Obama sat there glaring like this, not saying a word, while Netanyahu just smacked him back and forth. And anyway, it really comes down to it's not the U.S. president's in charge. It's the powers that be, the bureaucracy, and the system that's in place behind the presidents. It's this deep state bureaucracy that is always there, that never leaves, it never sleeps, it never changes with an election. And this bureaucracy is entrenched. It's like a cancer that it's like a, stage 4 cancer. It's spread everywhere. You can't cut it out at this point, not without killing the whole body. And it doesn't change. And it's involved deeply with our war industry, with our oil corporations, big pharma, more and more big tech. And that's the problem. And the connection with Zionism is that a lot of this, it's, despite the claim that it's anti-Semitic to mention it, Jews have a lot of money. Not all of them. I dated a Jewish girl years ago who was as broke as I was, but the investor class, there's no doubt that Jews have a disproportionate level of success in this investment class, and really have their hooks in to the people making the decisions in Washington, D.C. It's not just them. Like, look at Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney, he's not Jewish. His daughter Liz Cheney, these are not Jews, but they're Zionists, deeply, deeply connected to Israel. Genie Oil, several of them were Jews, Zionists, like Jacob Rothschild. But then you've got, Cheney. You've got other members of the governing board who are not Jewish, but who have relationships with them. Donald Trump is not Jewish, but his financial backer, the guy that covered his campaign for him, Sheldon Adelson, he was deeply committed to the Zionist agenda. And so that's why you end up with Trump, and they're just doing all this stuff. You're like, why is he doing all this stuff for Israel when he says he's America first? Well, it's because the person that paid for him to become president, and the person he would need to get him reelected again, him and his influence. So money is the issue. The money, the dirtiness of it all. It's not because they're Jews. It's the money. Jew or non-Jew. Money corrupts. Too much money. Love of money. Greed corrupts. And that's unfortunately a big reason that the Palestinians don't have more success in their independence movement, because they don't have the kind of money to bribe the other nations with that they need. Why doesn't Saudi Arabia step up? Why doesn't Egypt step up, or Jordan? Why don't these nations do anything in a significant way? I see people all the time making excuses for them. Well, it's because of this. Oh, bull crap. They don't do it because the U.S. government pays them off. U.S. government gives them a butt ton of money each year. Millions and millions and millions of dollars. But that money means you have to go along with Israel. You cannot back Palestinian independence. Sure, go out there and make your statements every now and then, but you take any substantive action towards supporting independence. So you've got Recep Erdogan of Turkey flapping his gums. You've got all these people talking, except for Iran. Iran takes action. They do it through proxies, but they take action. They're just about the only people really standing up. And through Iran, of course, is Hezbollah. Hezbollah is basically an Iranian proxy there in Lebanon. Yeah, John Foster says, gives them money and then threatens them with another Arab Spring if they don't go along. That's the truth. The Arab states, the leaders don't want to end up in a Gaddafi situation. And who would? I mean, they didn't just kill Gaddafi. They blew up his convoy, pulled him out of the, the pipe there, beat the hell out of him. And I watched a video of one guy as they're marching him away. One guy took a knife with a blade about that long, right up his rear end. Eventually, they shot him to kill him. Raving mad mob of violent extremists. Hillary Clinton cheering. Yeah, these leaders, they don't want to end up like that. They know the CIA will come in and screw things up for them. So anyway, well, listen, guys, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. It's late. We've been going on about 2 hours 44 minutes. So I'll wrap it up. Thank you. Please take a second to hit, if you haven't already done it, find the like button and click it for me. And really, I would love it if you guys would chip in a little bit. Doesn't have to be much. If everybody gave, a buck, it would add up, and it would make it more financially viable for me to really go hardcore with this. So I appreciate those of you that have donated. I appreciate those of you who would donate but can't. But I especially appreciate those of you who chip in $1 or $2. Thank you so much. And keep speaking up in social media for the Palestinians. Try not to shame our side through bad behavior. Keep your cool. Don't get nasty. When someone gets wild, the best thing you can do is to respond with facts. Spit some facts at them. Anyway. All right. Yeah, you guys can chip in a couple dollars for a coffee or whatever. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate you. I thank you for hanging out with me. Thank you to the Flick Off and the rest of you who have helped out with moderation. And thank you for those of you who have participated in the chat. Really appreciate it. So you guys take care, and I will talk with you in the next day or two.